Pay No Worship to the Garish Sun by D.P. Watt. The sad sun's face gave to the frightened world a livid light, and in the night-time torches seemed to burn amid the stars, and often drops of blood fell in rain-showers. Then Lucifer shone blue, with all his visage stained by darksome rust. Ovid, Metamorphoses, chapter 15. In the first year of my illness there was little of note. The same days passed by in the same ways, and whether they were bright with summer promise or dark with wintry foreboding, all was as irrelevant and as momentous as everything else. I filled my time with the usual drudgery of employment. What I did is of no consequence. I will not be remembered by history, even in the short term. This recollection of these years is brief, and only marks the frivolity of the final moments of a life as inconsequential as a fly's wing beat in a raging gale. That first year was haunted by the slightest haze of whiteness, as though a thin mist had seeped into the corners of my vision, and the world became a little dimmer. In the second year of my illness, I became more aware of my own shortcomings, a knowledge that is of no use to others, as they have been aware of them since they first met me. It was a year of education, let us say. Education in the normal manner is redundant. It is merely the management program for a civilization infatuated with mediocrity and self-delusion. The only real knowing is personal, private, and secret. I shall not bore you with the details, nor indeed dilute their significance by sharing them with anyone but my own decaying brain. Simply put, I am despicable. My personal life is a ruin, broken relationships, abandoned children, violence, abuse of alcohol and drugs by whatever means I could. I am a thief, and a liar, too. I have served time in prison, which only emboldened my crimes, and provided me with new skills through which I could perfect my deceits and cruelty. My professional life, if such it was, followed similar patterns, fraud being the most minor of my failings. I believe that once I may have killed a man. As there are so many men in this world, I am not that troubled by this incident, although I believe that for many this may rank as the worst of all my sins. I can assure you that it is not. My corruption has reached the deepest depths, and there is nothing that I have not done. Perhaps you believe that I hold myself in contempt, that I am some penitent, vomiting out my guilt to you in the hope that you will grace me with some stale crumbs of forgiveness. No. I say I am despicable so that you can quickly know a little of me, to give us a slight shared understanding before I continue my ramblings. In that second year, with what I had come to know of myself, I resolved to craft my wickedness, which had previously been conducted from that most vulgar of conditions, need. But a change was coming. I could feel it. With every day my sight grew worse, and the ghostly mist was spreading. What good was evil when I would be unable to relish the most basic of sensory pleasures from it? I sank into a mire of self-loathing and depression. There would have to be other routes found out of my malaise. In the third year of my illness, I became more aware of the city. Soon I would be done with it and could retreat inside myself entirely, but this year I would do it some justice, and keep my heart as open as possible to its opportunities, which are mostly vices. I live on Rochambeau, with a pleasant square opposite my apartment. I prefer it in the autumn, when the leaves have fallen and the green is gone, when the children find it too cold to play there and only a few birds are left, twittering through the skeletal branches that sway gently in the cold wind. The tourists have also dwindled by then. Being close to the station, I always hear the trundle of their cases on the pavement below, hurrying this way and that, searching for things to see and do, cafes and restaurants ticked off in their little guidebooks, before the next entertaining destination. I visited some art galleries and museums, Peering through my increasingly obscured eyes, it seemed to me that all of the artifacts contained in those places shared a common factor: their indistinguishability from ordinary things. A masterful and no doubt valuable portrait from the 18th century seemed to me as worthy as a crude graffiti on a repossessed factory wall, a cabinet containing neatly labeled Roman pottery as instructive as a litter-strewn verge. All that differentiated them was that time had dusted the former objects with the tawdry guilt of nostalgia and the falsehood of a librarian's knowledge. The more I traveled, the more my eyes transformed everything into a crumbling mass of meaningless endeavor. Office blocks vanished into misty oblivion, as did every monument and cathedral, bricks and rubble, teetering for a moment before the wind changed, and they were no more. There was no city. There were no people. There was only a void in the throes of a frenzied dream of otherness. In the 4th year of my illness, I thought it wise to acquaint myself with nature more fully, to understand better the urgent striving that had forced us pestilential microbes eagerly forward to our destruction. One day, whilst out purchasing the basic necessities to maintain existence, I happened upon a patch of ground where a tree had been felled the year before. It was at a busy crossroads where I had been unfortunate enough not to be knocked over a couple of times by speeding vehicles. I noticed a bright yellow mass, and for a time took it to be a sheet of plastic or even a blanket covering the area. I knelt down and examined the color as best I could with my disintegrating sight. They were dandelions. They had obviously colonized the ground rapidly once the tree had gone, thriving on the innumerable gases of the city. I knelt down and thrust my hands into the dry soil, gathering up a clump of the plants and depositing them in one of my shopping bags. On my return to my apartment, I placed them on the windowsill and folded the bag down around them. I poured a glass of water over the soil and took up a seat beside them. Over the next week, I watched as their yellow petals became heads of delicate, white, cottony seeds. One evening, I deemed my experiment over and blew them into the night air. Thus, had I propagated further life, it had been the same way with my own children. There were 2 of them. Or 3, I forget. I had merely cast them into the world to find their own way. Others, no doubt, looked after them well enough. My dandelion offspring will thrive or perish, too. I wonder what has made me so sentimental these days. Perhaps it is the approach of death. I shall open the door wide for her and cast roses at her feet. In the 5th year of my illness, I hired an amanuensis to assist in the documentation of my thought excrescences. He was a student of philosophy. I almost laughed myself to death. Philosophy, I said. Philosophy of what? He then went into some earnest explanation of his interest in phenomenology, and I listened to his words the way one does to pop music on the radio, a buzz of useless noise to mask the void. Once he was done, I shrugged and told him that I was little used to company, and for that matter even less used to conversation. We were to set to work, and in the frequent silences that would fill our time, he was to keep his thoughts to himself. For a few days we labored, if such it could be called. I sat there, deep in my blind dreams, he in his. I achieved a lot in those days, at least a sentence, or maybe even 2. On the morning of the 4th day, I believe it was, when I was sat beside the window, feeling the warm spring air, heavy with exhaust fumes, against my face, he leant over and whispered to me, "You're still beautiful, you know." Beauty? What did he know of beauty? Beauty is the incremental implosion of the rubbish heap, the decline of empires, and the fever of flies around dog shit. Beauty is a fart in a morgue, dried vomit on a slice of wedding cake, not the idiotic fascination with faces and physique. "Do not use that word around me again," I said. "Never utter that word in my company." He was flustered. He apologized. An hour or 2 passed. The din in the street below told me it was lunchtime. The clatter of oversized American coffee cups and the grinding of bleached teeth on expensive sandwiches could be heard behind the excited gabble of office gossip. He assailed my thoughts again. "I mean it," he said. "I really do mean it." He then reached forward and cupped his hand around my breast. I was amazed. I sat in silence for a few minutes. He did not take his hand away. I felt his warmth pass into my cold skin. It was that affronted me most, the sense of his hot flesh corrupting me with its vitality. He slid his hand further down my body, heading for my crotch. I clasped my left hand around his and felt him flinch at the icy coldness of my touch. Then, in one movement, I reached for the letter opener I had used that morning, which still lay on the table beside me. I pulled his hand onto the arm of the chair and drove the letter opener through it until it struck the wood beneath. He did not scream, merely a muffled groan and some whimpering. I forced his hand firmly down and felt the blood dripping out. He struggled, but I still had strength in me. After a moment, I released him and could hear him struggling to remove the blunt knife. The whimpering continued as he gathered his belongings together. I did not say a word. The door to my flat slammed shut, and I never heard from him again. No doubt he would recount such rich experiences in his next illuminating essay. In the 6th year of my illness, I was almost blind. The world seemed entirely shrouded in a blurry whiteness, and only slight shapes could be discerned by intense peering and squinting. It was a situation that gave me great comfort. Soon I would have no means by which to know the world. By then I had few acquaintances left. I had done well to jettison them. They took time away from self-reflection. One constant friend remained. He was a virtual recluse, a writer who had been of some note in the 30s and 40s. He was a critic of sorts, but not the sort of frivolous opinion, and certainly not the sort to write on recent matters or of any popular concern. He had waned in the public eye. Those few souls capable of following his vision remained true to him, though, and occasional books emerged, ignored by the masses. He was not of his time. I almost loved him. One afternoon, in July I think it was, he paid me a visit, unannounced. I was surprised by how much this uplifted me, so hateful was I of all companionship, human or otherwise. He had traveled in by train from the country where he now lived, surrounded by books and paintings probably worth millions, but he would never part with them. He even managed to get me out of the apartment for a couple of hours, into the leafy square where I sat with him and drank a cheap red wine from the bottle, chewing on some stale croissants he had brought with him. We said little. We had never needed to. We waited for the day to pass. I caught glimpses of small shapes in the bushes near us. "Cats," he said. Cats. The only creatures I could tolerate in any way, with their sly profundity and commitment to idleness. There was something to be respected in a cat. I told him of my thoughts of suicide. He asked me why I would bother. I asked him to explain. His thoughts on the matter were clear enough, and thankfully without unnecessary emotional remonstration. Suicide binds you to the world more forcefully than any other death, he explained. Why, when it is the world you wish to escape, would you do the world's bidding? For all is unending death and turmoil, and whilst one might never win such a game, there is as little point to ceasing play as there is to continuing. It is only an affirmation of the negative condition of existence. I stared up at the sky. The little that I could see was a rich blue. The milky white shadows in my eyes supplied the clouds. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my face. It was that abhorrent thing that kept all this nonsense going, this spinning, plowing, fighting, loving, laughing, and loathing nonsense. Who would have thought that a great ball of flaming dust could have caused such terror and delight? Ah! The gods would still be amused by their perverse game if their churches were not now designer flats and their sacred groves now firewood. All the world should be in love with night, I thought. Its cold embraces truth, the truth of eternity and empty frozen vastness. I sat a while in silence, and then agreed with my friend. When we had finished the wine, I declared I would go in for a rest. He said it was unlikely he would return to the city in the coming years, and that we would probably not see each other again. We shook hands and wished each other a good death. That night was very warm, and I barely slept. I imagined him walking down the long road to his home, his tall frame stooped, the moon casting his long shadow across the dusty ground. In the 7th year of my illness, I determined to pluck out my eyes. 7 is a magical number, I am told, if you believe in such twaddle. So what better year to do away with the burden of vision entirely, and fall back upon other ways of perceiving this degraded rot of existence? On a practical level, it was simple. A small spoon, a sharp knife, and courage. I nearly bled to death. A concerned neighbor, hearing my scream, saved me from such release, and I awoke in a hospital ward where I heard the electronic beeping of existence monitored to the point of perfection, so that the last reeking moments of consumption could be wrung from the bodies on hand. The place stank of piss and puke, overcooked mulch of food, and bleach-washed corridors, which rang with the echoes of diligent observation. I festered there for weeks, and was finally transferred to a psychiatric unit. Who else but the insane would pluck out their eyes, the doctors reasoned. Thankfully, some diligent accountant must have deemed me suitable for release, and I was taken home to begin my new life. And it was new, for a while. My mind had been unshackled from the yoke of light, and I was free to revel in the filth of scent and the grime of touch, the oppression of sound and the trial of taste. I was able to experience fresh perspectives on nothingness. Whilst the manner of their perspectives was innovative, the conclusions I reached were similar. I found no difference between the stench of the city and that of the countryside. One is the relentless mycoid rot of millennia in service to the filthy fecundity of cyclical decay. The other, a juvenile enslavement to the lust for speed or the embrace of sloth. All is simply the cadaverous comfort of enforced loneliness and the tyranny of micromanaged time. Neither is worth fighting for or against. As for the stink of bodies, on the rare moments of my encounter with them, they reek of a milky sweetness even when they are unwashed. They pollute the air with their rank hope. Their pores weep with the poison of positivity. Thankfully, I have not had to touch the flesh of another for many months now. My own feels like rough paper, here and there punctuated by a scab or two. My nails are cracked, and they split at the slightest exertion, snagging on clothes and upholstery, jolting me back from my thoughts with sudden painful spasms. Other materials have become strange to me. Organic matter of all kinds is foul, almost as though I am now able to discern the terrible veneer masking its rotting core. Fabric and furnishings are equally repellent, products of a cruel shame of nakedness and arrogant aspirations to erase the moon, the stars, and the chilling truth of the elements. I have no interest in discerning the different sounds about me or their origins. I open my windows wide to hear the street cacophony. The sound of screaming drunkards in another fight is as melodic as stray concertos carried on the wind. The metallic crunch of car upon speeding car is as beautiful as the dawn chorus. Of great solace is the scuttling and rattling of cockroaches in the corners of my filthy rooms. I imagine them chewing slowly through everything ever created, clearing and consuming the work of pointless progress into a mountain of dry feces. I quickly became bored of the taste of food. I now consume only a thick paste of rice or a weak vegetable broth. For a brief time I had enjoyed the surprising flavors of things about me, a pen, buttons, paper, books were a particularly peculiar delight, but soon I tired of all these too. It was not so much the particular taste that offended me, but rather the provocation of the mind by any stimulant. I had reached the very limits. It is my conclusion that the nose, ears, and tongue are as repugnant as the eyes. Would that we might have remained single cells, shuffling in chemical ignorance. One day, if the dead gods are kind, I shall tumble from my high window, and the dull thud of my flesh and bones disintegrating on the pavement will disappear into the urgent buzz of early evening commuters and the loud chatter of television sets. It will be a fleeting, quiet sound. Someone will pause momentarily, shrug, then turn back to their business, and I shall never be thought of again. The last rays of a rusty sun will strike a mirror in a bedroom where young lovers have given up after an afternoon of desperate copulation, and in that fading orange light their physical passion will be refracted into ceaseless drudgery. The encroaching night air will creep upon people's shivering flesh, and they will huddle together in the streets, hoping that the rain will stay away long enough to get home to the warmth of fires and forgetting. Out, Far out, beyond the placid, patient suburbs, out beyond the interminable train tracks and the relentless pylons, out in the silent darkness, deep in a forgotten primeval forest, a cry will resound from a beast that none could name. It is hungry and cold, lonely and proud.